potential path back to big events. COVID passports will be among the measures trialled at crowded events in England, including sports matches and nightclubs.
It's the only way that they're going to get the economy back and people back into some sort of normality.
Everybody hasn't been vaccinated, have they? So I think it's a really bad thing, to tell you the truth.
Foreign holidays could soon have the green light too, but only to certain places. The government will outline its traffic light system for international travel. Also on the programme, petrol bombs are thrown at police in Northern Ireland in what's being described as an orchestrated attack.
Cambridge across the finish line.
And Cambridge do the double in the first boat race on home water for 75 years.
This is ITV News with Duncan Gollestani.
Good evening. The government says COVID passports could pave the way for the return of crowds to major sporting competitions and audiences to theatres and nightclubs within weeks. A series of pilot events will take place across England beginning this month. The passports that will record if someone has received a vaccine, recently had coronavirus or has a negative test result is one of a number of ideas being trialled, along with mass rapid testing. With the details, here's our political reporter, Shihab Khan.
It's been a while since we've seen scenes like this, but there are hopes it won't be too much longer before we have some sort of normality. The government will be trialling a series of measures to find the best way to get large gatherings back up and running. There are 9 events, including the FA Cup final, that have signed up for a pilot scheme that includes increased testing or the use of COVID passports. Here in Liverpool, there were mixed views about that idea.
It's the only way that they're going to get the economy back and people back into some sort of normality. So yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Everybody hasn't been vaccinated, have they? So I think it's a really bad thing, to tell you the truth.
I think it's good because I do think now we need to look at the bigger picture and moving out of this in a safe way. We're 12 months on and everyone's been affected by it.
The COVID passports will look at 3 things: whether an individual has had a vaccine, whether they've recently tested negative, or whether they have natural immunity having had the virus in the last 6 months. The government sees this review as being crucial to understanding how venues across the country, including potentially the ones here in London's West End, could open safely this summer. After a long period of being closed, they'll be keen to get as many people through the doors as possible.
If this can be a tool to enable businesses to open sooner, because it could potentially mean that we can get rid of social distancing sooner, then that could mean that some of these businesses can open sooner. And certainly if they are open, then they can open more profitably.
Happy birthday, my girl. What's your name, my love?
This comedy club in Liverpool was forced to offer online shows. They'll now be participating in the testing part of the trial, where those who go to an event will be tested both before and after to determine the spread of the virus. The co-owner is, however, concerned about the idea of COVID passports.
I think it would massively deter people on coming to the events, to be honest with you. I think it's very clear that there's a massive backlash on the COVID passports at the moment. I think the scheme that we're doing is going to be more effective because it trials basically a normal show with no restrictions in place.
There is no mention of pubs, bars or restaurants in the pilot trials, but the review buys some time for the government to determine the best way to reopen the country. Shihab Khan, ITV News.
Tomorrow, the Prime Minister will outline how he plans to restart international travel. He is expected to announce a traffic light system for England, where countries will be categorised based on risk, determined by rates of infection and the pace of the vaccine rollout. It's received a cautious welcome, but many in the aviation industry want the government to move faster. Martha Fairley reports.
Andrea Watson loves to take holidays abroad, but had to cancel all her plans last year. She's hoping it won't be long before she can book a trip to Dubai.
I'd like to think so because, like I say, I worked through all the pandemic last year and I've had the first vaccine, due to have the second one at the end of April. So I'd like to think there's nothing to stop us from going because we've done everything that the government have asked.
The Prime Minister's made it clear that a ban on foreign travel will remain in place until at least May the 17th. But when it's lifted, travel abroad from England could operate on a traffic light system, where countries could be ranked according to their vaccination rate, the number of new daily infections, and whether there are any emerging new variants. The travel industry is keen to see the details.
How does one country move from one colour to the next? And that will be really important. What we don't want is a stop-start that we saw last summer, and the risk of countries changing overnight. We cannot afford that chaos. That just cannot happen.
Other UK nations may choose a different approach, but after months with their planes grounded, UK airlines want bolder measures, with bosses writing to the Prime Minister saying they're confident there can be a safe and meaningful restart to travel in May. In their letter, airline bosses say they believe vaccinated passengers should not be subject to travel restrictions and that testing could be used to reduce barriers to travel. They say only very high-risk areas would be subject to more stringent measures. But any scheme will also depend on the willingness of other countries to let British tourists in. Malta said it will be welcoming fully vaccinated Brits from the 1st of June.
Hopefully we would not need to do any tests or provide any documentation, just a green passport, some sort of digital passport or whatever. But I can assure you, whatever the plan is, it will be safe, not just for us, but also for people coming to Malta to spend their holiday there.
For those dreaming of a summer getaway, hope may be on the horizon. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Shihab is back with me now. Shihab, lots of announcements from the government, but not all of them are going to be popular with MPs.
Absolutely. There are some MPs, particularly those on the Conservative backbenches, the same party as the government, who are concerned about, in particular, those COVID passports. They argue it creates a two-tier society. There'll be some people who are able to use them, others who haven't engaged with the vaccine process who won't be able to use them. They have raised concerns about that, and we know discussions are ongoing about how to mitigate those concerns. Beyond that, that same group of MPs are worried about the speed at which restrictions are being lifted. They think because the vaccine rollout is going so well, we should be lifting them sooner. Now, we know the Prime Minister will be doing a press conference tomorrow. He'll be saying that the current roadmap is still going on at pace. April 12th is the next day where we'll have some more easing of restrictions, where you'll be able to do things like cut your hair and go to the gym. So at the moment, that's the plan, and the government continues to go on at speed.
Shihab, thank you very much. Police say the dogs which killed a pensioner in her garden in Rowley Regis have been humanely destroyed. Lucille Downer, who was a great-grandmother, was attacked by the dogs on Good Friday. They had entered her garden from a neighbouring property through a hole in the fence. She died at the scene. In Northern Ireland, it has been another day of clearing up after several nights of violence. Last night, on the outskirts of Belfast, police were targeted with petrol bombs and cars were hijacked in what they described as an orchestrated attack. Politicians on both the unionist and nationalist sides have appealed for calm. From Belfast, Deborah McAleese reports.
Petrol bombs were thrown and cars hijacked as tensions between loyalists and the PSNI yet again ignited. This time it wasn't teenagers, but grown men who took to the streets in an orchestrated attack on police officers. Police said a crowd of up to 30 people were involved in the disorder. For those living here, there's real worry that more is to come.
What happened here last night in Newton Abbey brought nothing except fear to communities, attacks to the police and destructions to the streets, and local people are generally appalled by what happened.
I just couldn't believe it was happening. We worked so hard to get away from those type of scenes, and here we are seeing them again. And there's just a general concern and fear, and where are we going with this?
Last night's violence followed scenes like this on Friday night in Belfast and Londonderry, where children and teenagers as young as 13 were arrested.
There have been tensions within the loyalist community here for many months over post-Brexit trading arrangements. And these tensions ramped up during the week following a decision by prosecutors not to charge 24 Sinn Féin politicians over their attendance at a large-scale Republican funeral during COVID-19 restrictions. And this led to calls from unionist leaders for the resignation of the PSNI Chief Constable, saying that he had lost the confidence of their communities. Sinn Féin said this violence is a result of inflammatory rhetoric from the DUP and Ulster Unionists. But DUP leader Arlene Foster urged young people not to get drawn into disorder, no matter how frustrated they might be. With politicians here unable to reconcile their differences, the potential for an escalation of violence is very real. Deborah McAleese, ITV News, Belfast.
Pope Francis has celebrated Easter Sunday Mass in front of a small, socially distanced congregation. Usually his Easter message would be delivered to tens of thousands of worshippers, although technically it still was. This time many thousands watched the service on the Vatican's social media platforms. Here, the Archbishop of Canterbury used his Easter Sunday service to remember loved ones taken from us during the pandemic. Justin Welby also urged people to choose a better future rather than live in a society that only benefits the rich. In the Premier League, it's been an Easter Sunday battle for survival for the clubs at the bottom. Newcastle United picked up a precious point in their relegation fight against Spurs, but Fulham's position in the bottom three took a turn for the worse after losing 3-1 at Aston Villa. Chris Scudder has the action.
Not much to smile about for Steve Bruce at Newcastle. Reports of disharmony in the camp and a precarious position in the Premier League. A little bit of luck then would help, but a combination of the post and Lloris's backside scuppered that.
Around as well. Extraordinary goalkeeping.
Still, some substandard Spurs defending gave them a helping hand, and Joe Linton's goal briefly lifted the gloom for the boss.
And welcome goal for Joe Linton.
The good news lasted not much more than a minute, and Harry Kane rarely needs a second invitation.
Straight away.
If that was scrappy, this could not have been more clinical. Kane at his best, 2-1 Spurs.
News for Newcastle.
And that looked like being that until the Toon took the aerial route and Joe Willock equalised. Only a point, but it could be crucial in the run-in. A win for Fulham at Villa would have taken them above Newcastle on goal difference, and a terrible mistake from England's Tyrone Mings gifted a goal to Alexandra Mitrovic. But Fulham's survival struggle then took a turn for the worse. Mings made up for his mistake by setting up an equaliser for Trezeguet.
Fulham unable to hold on to their lead.
And before Fulham had steadied themselves, they were 2-1 down. Same scorer, big trouble for the Cottagers. If they'd learned their lines, they fluffed them at the crucial moment. And Villa's third goal from Ollie Watkins leaves Fulham stuck in the bottom three. Chris Scudder, ITV News.
And finally, Cambridge looked very much at home as they took on Oxford in today's university boat races. It was perhaps not surprising, with the race swapping its traditional course along the Thames for Cambridge's Great Ooze. COVID forced the move, last seen during the Second World War. Ria Chatterjee reports.
Go! And eventually, attention going away.
To the sounds of their own strength, they started. That's to say, there were none of the normal cheers from crowds. In fact, not much about this race has been normal. Different river, different training protocol. The one thing the pandemic couldn't impact was the tension.
If I was the Oxford Cox, I would not be comfortable right now. If I'm sitting there, blade tips on blade tips.
Fourth win in consecutive years for the Cambridge women's crew.
Usually it is under the echoing arches of Chiswick Bridge. Today it is the first smaller little humpback bridge that crosses the river at Littleport, but the feeling is exactly the same.
Not quite exactly the same for spectators, though some caught a view from their own gardens. For others,
it's a real shame we can't go to see it. You know, it hasn't happened here for a lot of years, and I think most locals are a bit upset about it.
Well, it's a little bit disappointing, perhaps not for myself, but I know my mum would have loved to have come, being a Cambridge born and bred.
You won't be able to see it only on your television, so you know, it's such a shame really.
Cambridge have the victory.
A win for the Cambridge men's team too. Though there were difficulties, less training time on the water, a lot of it on rowing machines in bedrooms, there was perhaps nothing more challenging than the race itself. Ria Chatterjee, ITV News.
And that is it. Coming up, the news where you are. I'm back with the late news at 10. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. Bye-bye.